Wonderful, thank you. And we'll have a roll call, please.
Alrighty, Director Hardy.
Present.
Director Ragsdale.
Present.
Director Chambers.
Present.
Director Duncan.
Present.
Director Pierce.
Present.
Director Schneider. Director Stevenson. Director Vella.
Present.
And Director Zichterman.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Just so you understand the rules, we have to have a majority in the room, and then we have Director Villa, who is in Europe, who is, and each time we vote on anything, he'll need to let us know if there's anyone in the room with him. So that's 18 or over. We are so glad to have you. I will say, thinking about this, preparing for the meetings and having so much stuff to do and read, I want to thank you all for the time and effort you put in, because this is important work, and thank you for serving. And it is, some of you are paid to be here, and the rest of you are here because you just can't let it go. And that's what my husband always says, babe, can't you just let it go? And I said, no, that reliable supply of water, high quality, at a fair price. And he goes, see you later. So glad to have you here. It does not look like we need a closed door session. We hope to have more information possibly in May at the general meeting, but we will not need a the closed session today. All right, we're going to go on. We're up to our consent calendar, approval of minutes. Do we have any question on the minutes? Remember, if you were in the meeting or read them or watched the really riveting version online, you are welcome to vote on those. Any questions? Darren. I should say Director Duncan.
That's okay. I wasn't at the February 12th meeting. I had a bereavement, and I'm shown as there, so I want to make sure that gets adjusted in the minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it's okay.
And let the minutes also show that Director Schneider has made it. Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I just told everybody thank you for being here because we care about this. All right, do I have any other comments on the minutes? Do I have a motion? Director Pierce.
I'd be happy to make the motion to accept the consent calendar and the minutes as provided.
Thank you so much. Yes, that is the only thing I should say on our consent calendar. Do I have a second to that? Director Zichterman, thank you. Have a second. Do we have any discussion? Because we have one member remote, all votes have to be done by roll call. So we'll let you do that.
Director Hardy.
Yes.
Director Ragsdale.
Yes.
Director Chambers.
Yes.
Director Duncan.
Yes.
Director Pierce.
Yes.
Director Schneider. Yes. Director Stevenson not here. Director Vella.
Yes, and there's no public, and there's nobody under 18, and I am 21, so we're good.
And Director Zichterman.
Yes.
Okay. Passes unanimous.
Thank you. You may not have understood directly if there's anyone over 18, 18 or over in your room. There you go. Wonderful. Okay, we are up to, and I was just changing my, we are up to number 4, public comment. Members of the public may address the committee on any issues not listed on the agenda, but are within our purview. Comments on the matters are listed, and I just reset for 3 minutes. And I've got 2 cards. I'm trying to think what microphone we will have anyone use is what I'm looking around for. Okay, wonderful. Was this the order you were given? Okay. I first have Spreck Rosenkrantz. Please come. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Spreck Rosecrans, Restore Hetch Hetchy. I heard the chair talk about reliable water at a good price, and I think everybody wants that. And so if you don't know, in 1995, Tom Clark, general manager of the Kern County Water Agency, negotiated access to the Kern Water Bank. And in the late 90s, excess flows in the California Aqueduct went into the Kern Water Bank. The investors in that water bank started this huge farming for almonds and pistachios. We were already doing a lot of that, plenty, of course, mandarins, pomegranates, but it was hugely, hugely successful, very low cost. And since that time, cities have also invested in groundwater recharge, much of it in Kern County. Alameda County has done that. Zone 7 has done that. Valley Water has done that. Metropolitan has done that. Metropolitan has done that in other places as well. San Francisco's got a great program over in Colma, Daly City, but it's relatively small. The larger opportunity for San Francisco, and that means for you, is in the East Side Water District within the East Turlock Groundwater Sustainability Agency. And it's something we've encouraged San Francisco to pursue. We've encouraged you folks to pursue it. I wrote a letter last week and sent it to San Francisco. I'm sure it'll eventually find its way into your pockets, but it's something that you folks really ought to pursue. It's the best way to get reliable water at a low cost. The trick is institutional cooperation, and it's not so much East Side, she's nodding, it's probably Turlock, honestly. And I don't know, honestly, if San Francisco is as motivated, they've got other issues, other politics, they've got their wastewater issues, as you folks are. And so whether you can encourage San Francisco to do this or find a way to do that on their own, on your own, I highly recommend this as something that ought to be a high priority in your water supply portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. And then I have Dave Warner.
Okay, cool, thank you. Dave Warner, thank you all for your service. It is important work you guys do. I'm excited about our potential. Two things stand out. The board is starting to become more broadly engaged on topics that make a difference, and our CEO is listening intently to what the board is telling him. At the last board meeting, his and Mr. Ritchie's discussion on capital investment priorities and decisions was terrific. I took from it that there's starting to be an understanding of cost issues. This promising potential couldn't come at a better time. BAWSCA faces a very different situation today than from 10 years ago. 10 years ago, the focus was on supply reliability, including finding reliable sources of supply. While demand was down, the thinking was that it was just due to the drought and would start climbing again, as evidenced by both our 2015 and 2020 urban water management plans. The Bay Delta plan back then was even more of a threat than it is today. Water rates, while considered elevated even back then, were considered relatively stable. The SFPUZ's costs were relatively stable as well, as they were moving towards finishing the WSIP, the Water System Improvement Plan. Today's situation is different. Demand has been flat to declining for the last 10 years. The SFPUC has substantially increased its capital investments on the regional water system. Fixed costs are way up. Debt is now roughly 50% of the cost of what we pay for water. The ability to reduce costs if we need to is very limited. Water rates have doubled in the last 10 years from almost $1,300 per acre foot to almost $2,500. Water rates are projected to continue to increase even under the assumption of increasing demand. Another way to look at it is the SFPUC is spending at an increasing rate, a faster rate than increasing water sales can offset. Then the question becomes, well, what if demand doesn't increase? What would water rates look like then? Or worse yet, what if demand is projected to increase and we pay for additional supplies, but the demand doesn't actually increase? We'd be in a much worse situation than San Diego County Water Authority. Where am I going with this? You as a board policy committee members spend a small number of hours, some of you a lot, a month focused on BAWSCA issues. The rest of the board spends even less time. However, your talented CEO and his staff are full-time on BAWSCA issues. It's critically important that you all tell them what his priorities should be and how he and his staff should spend their time. Some of you may say that reliability is still the most important issue to spend time on, but you as a group might add affordability and better demand forecasting to name a couple other top issues. As a consumer, most important to me would be, one, that you as a board are educated on the issues, and two, that you have a robust discussion on the issues before setting priorities. I hope you'll encourage education and robust discussion as you set priorities and make decisions. You're off to an exciting start. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate your time. Is there anyone else in the public? Those were the only two cards I had. Is there anyone else? I do not see anyone, so we will move on. Wonderful. We're up to number 5. This is an action item, and it's our work plan. Director Schmeigel, take it away.
No longer a director.
What's that?
You call me Director Smegel.
Oh, great.
Promoted.
But I appreciate
Yes,
the, I
you're-
appreciate the memory.
Yeah,
the
it
memory
is a
there.
memory, but
Okay.
you're right. Our CEO. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit on this item 5A, which is the work plan and the budget and assessment. So you've seen this before. The prior iteration came before the board policy committee two months ago, and then the board last month. And just as a reminder, these are our major work products in the work plan, continuing our role in managing the water supply agreement, administering the bonds, oversight of the WISIP and the capital improvement programs, as well as asset management. Again, engaging with the alternative water supply plan, participating in the Bay Delta and FERC proceedings to protect our regional water supplies, continuing development of Strategy 2050 into the next year, finalizing our updated regional water demand assessment, and then the other big new thing will be implementing the Tier 2 and water supply amendments that are finally coming to fruition here at the end of this fiscal year. And last but not least, implementing our core and subscription conservation programs. So those should be familiar to you. We did make a couple of changes since the last go-round and wanted to alert you to that. The budget as a whole is about $70,000 higher than it was when we last presented it to the board. And this primarily focuses on 3 items. The first is that there's been a little bit of a delay in the spending pattern of the regional water demand study. And so there's $40,000 that will not be spent in this current fiscal year that we're adding to the next fiscal year. And that's not a change in the overall 2-year budget plan for the program. It will result, we're suggesting not changing the current year budget because of this potential $40,000 savings, but it will increase our reserve at the end of the year. But we are proposing to increase the $40,000 for next year for that item. Then there's 2 items that are related to consultants and Hanson Bridgett, and that has to do with the 2028 decisions. These are the decisions relating to permanent water supply for Santa Clara and San Jose. We're coming up to 2028, and in reviewing our work efforts, we determined we probably need some more money in there to deal with a potential amendment to the water supply agreement covering that item. So we've increased the budget there. And then as we get to the end of the year and are getting to the finalization by San Francisco of the water supply amendments, we will be in the summer and hopefully not too far into the fall looking to get approval from all of our BAWSCA agencies. And so that will require additional effort, and we're budgeting for that additional effort. Finally, and not a monetary thing, but we did take board comment at the last meeting about affordability, and we reviewed the work plan. And you'll see it's not in the slides, but it is in the agenda packet that went out. Is the red bolded language on the work plan shows areas that we identified where really I think we were already considering affordability, but we wanted to make sure that the board was aware, the public was aware that this is a consideration and this is something that we do actively work toward in those work plan items. And so those changes are reflected in the text of the work plan table. So the proposed operating budget for 2025, 2026 is 1.2% less than the proposed budget from this current year. It fully funds our annual OPEB expense. It includes a budget allowance for a 5% adjustment to existing salaries. That includes both COLA and merit increases. And it has a total water customer cost of $2.97 per person per year, which is 3 cents less than last year. You can see the breakdown, and that is not very different from the breakdown that we had in the last, in the board meeting packet. Our general considerations for funding the budget is that we generally obviously want to rely on our assessments. We do have a reserve, general reserve, and so focusing on the current general reserve balance of about 1.4 million. That represents 24% of our adopted budget this year. So any consideration of an assessment increase has to factor in where we are with the general reserve and also where we'd like to be in the policy guidelines. So keep that in mind. The next factor is 2 months ago at this committee meeting, we discussed whether to prepay, whether and how to prepay the outstanding pension obligation of BAWSCA. The projected and unfunded accrued liability, the UAL, right now is 1.264 million. Is currently estimated to be paid off in 20 years. And that's the way that the state interacts with us, is that they give you a default 20-year amortization. We discussed at the last meeting that it seemed like the best opportunity was to make additional discretionary payments. They don't tie us into an additional payment every year, but they do allow, we can, essentially it's like prepaying your mortgage payment. So you can pay any amount in any year, and that acts to lower that $1.3 million UAL. And so there's two options that the staff is recommending or proposing as options. One is that we could fund an ADP this year out of general reserve and could do that now. The suggested amount is about $66,000. And that would represent, if we spent an additional $66,000 for the next 10 years, that would pay this 20-year obligation in 10 years instead of 20. So we could make that you could make that determination now to add that to the budget. Alternatively, we can get through the end of the year and look to the final general reserve that the organization has. That's usually finalized in late November, so it would be available for discussion at the December BPC and at the January board meeting. And then after that general reserve number is known, you as a board could make a determination on the $66,000 or any other amount that you would wish to contribute toward lowering that UAL balance. And so that's really the question that we have for the BPC and ultimately for the board is whether you'd like to allocate money to that now or wait and see how the reserve goes at the end of the year. And so in table form, what staff has developed are a few options for your consideration. Option 2 is a 2.3% assessment increase. That assessment is the same percentage increase as San Francisco's wholesale water rate increase, and is very similar to the CPIU that we're talking about for instance, staff salaries, and that's 2.08%. So the 2.3% is kind of a moderate increase proposed that's in line with other inflationary increases that we're looking at. The option on the right, which are the option 3s, represent a 5.2% increase. That is the amount of assessment increase that would be required to make the budget balance. So to expect not to take any money out of reserve, but rather to pay the entire amount of the budget through assessments, and that would be a 5.2% increase. And then splitting those two options into A and B. The B represents the distinct payment to CalPERS for the additional discretionary payment. So staff is recommending that the board consider option 2A or B. Happy to hear discussion on that. And then let me see if I have, yeah. So at option 2A or 2B with a proposed operating budget, as you see there, of 5.547 million. And then for the committee to recommend the board adopt the work plan as proposed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm just thinking you're going to get a lot of mileage out of teasing me about calling you director still. I wonder real quick if we could go back to slide 8. I work really hard at,
Sorry.
isn't that slide 8 on the proposed? One more, right there.
Okay.
Under the oversight as SFPUC, you just mentioned it. It's always good to write, to say out the full WSIP stands for.
Water System Improvement Plan, is that water?
Program.
Correct.
Okay, I thought it was, but it's especially for people who are not versed in this. Sometimes we speak water a little too much. And I worry about keeping up, making ourselves accessible to our public. Also, I want to thank you for the red and blue in the work plan. That made it so much easier to read and recognize where any changes. So that, I know that sped it up for me, not having to go through and find those and mark them. So I appreciate that. Director Schneider, please.
Thank you, and I share those. It did make it, because otherwise we've read the same thing so many times. So I have a couple of dumb questions, and but we'll start with that slide since it's up. What does oversight of WSIP, the 10-year CIP and asset management actually mean?
So,
in a very practical sense.
So our interaction with San Francisco is generally governed by the water supply agreement. And in the water supply agreement, there are specific dictated interactions, dictated steps that are required of San Francisco. And actually at the last board meeting, we made a presentation. So we had in the agenda packet and in the slides presentation on how we interact specifically with them and specifically related to the CIP, the 10-year capital improvement program. And so in that area in particular, we talked about how we meet with them at certain times of the year prior to their taking a decision, and then they come and present to us and tell us kind of what was decided. There are some examples of the effectiveness of that that we mentioned last month as well. The Mountain Tunnel project was a big one, where initially I think San Francisco wanted to just replace the Mountain Tunnel, and BAWSCA pushed very, very firmly back on that to see why they couldn't repair it. And eventually the San Francisco decided to in fact repair it, which I think will end up saving BAWSCA customers and the whole system a lot of money in terms of the CapEx that's done. So that's all in the water supply agreement. There's currently some informal discussions that go on around that as well, but that was all discussed last month.
Thank you. And that's actually a perfect example. So last night, I spoke for BAWSCA at Millbrae's council meeting where they were looking at water rates, and I will tell you that city council is not happy. And but part of it was also the impact of the tariffs from a week ago. Now, already today, the tariffs may be on a 90-day hold. What that means for any of us, anybody still affiliated with local governments, is one, do you put in a hiring freeze? Do you put in a slowdown? What are your own local capital improvements largely related to water because of our aging water structure? So I think last night was just a study session. It would be very helpful if BAWSCA staff could supply examples of where BAWSCA has saved money. Because with 4 out of 5 brand new council members on that, and that's likely the same in other cities, they have no idea what's happened in the past. And that's a perfect example, and it was in the packet on there. But it has me thinking of, I have not done it for water supplies. I have done it for SFO. I've gone back and reread their thousands and thousands of pages of environmental documents and planning documents for the airport. I have not done that for water. I'm going to do it now. I mean, professionally, I have read many an EIR, EIS on that. But I wonder how many of SFPUC's capital improvements are what we really have to do, no argument. Things we'd like to do. And things we'd like to do when we've got plenty of money and our water customers are okay with what they're paying on that. So I wonder, in our oversight of the CIP, are there things that really are just something really nice to do and not something you have to do? And that's what I'll be searching the documents for, but I would love, I don't know if that's within reason, to ask staff to say, if we're providing oversight, and if it's my understanding that we, the member agencies, pay 60% of those improvements, then we might want a stronger say in what should or shouldn't be done, or maybe some things can wait. I mean, obviously the earthquake stuff had to happen because you never know, no argument. But are there some other things in there and I simply don't know?
Yeah, and I think that staff's happy to assist you with that investigation. We have extensive written communication with them. So there's and I don't want to speak for Tom because I know Tom's the expert on this, but my understanding is that when the CIP, the draft CIP comes out, there's a lot, Tom and his consultants and his staff work very diligently to evaluate all the projects in the CIP, and certainly not interested in San Francisco doing things that are not necessary.
Well, things that are overriding considerations on certain communities. And that is something that SFO and transportation agencies use all the time on a select few number of communities. And frankly, that has to stop. So anyway, I thought that was great. The other thing that would be very helpful that came up is paying off the bond, the 2034 bond, if there's what that might mean earlier, how painful. They had a discussion of what money costs now. I think I brought this up, I read it in the minutes. What money costs now versus money costs then. But again, for any of our communities with a lot of people on fixed income, generally meaning seniors or disabled, of which my city has the largest percentage of seniors, what's happening now is gonna hurt on that. So how can we look at that? And otherwise, I would love to say, let's pay the $66,000 every year, let's pay it off. But I don't know how many screaming customers, or what they will do is they'll stop watering their yards, and now half of Millbrae is at high fire risk, and they can't stop watering their yards. So we're in this conundrum of that. And I'll bring that up later when we talk about the education programs, what we might be able to do to help on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Schneider. Tom Francis, was there something you'd like to add to that? Please.
Just that I support our general manager. I'll be working with the general manager to determine how to give you the feedback that you requested.
Thank you.
Excellent. So what staff is looking at in this first action item is comments or questions about the work plan and the results we hope to achieve and the proposed operating budget. Then, especially since we're a small group, I would like to, once we've answered those questions, maybe go around from each director and see how everyone feels about 2A or 2B. Not taking a straw poll, really, but just to give your thoughts and positives and negatives to each one. So do I have any more questions about the work plan? Oh, please, Director Zickerman.
Jim Smale, just a quick question on one of the items, the protect members' water supply and financial interests in the SFPUC's required 2028 decisions. And I know someone mentioned San Jose, Santa Clara. I don't remember the year 2028 being fixed to those decisions before. So can you tell me a little bit about that? And is that the extent of the decisions that are involved?
Can I ask Allison to weigh in on this? Or? I mean, I could try, but then you might have to correct me.
Sure.
So.
As part of the contract with San Francisco, the ultimate decision about whether or not to make San Jose and Santa Clara permanent customers was pushed out to 2028. Also, the wholesale customers claim that they are entitled to more water than the 184 supply assurance, is also tied to that date. So we are coming upon that date, and so that is part of the discussions that staff amongst San Francisco, San Jose, Santa Clara, and San Francisco have been talking about that, but we will need to do something more formal before that time.
Thank you. Even though here I represent BAWSCA, I also am from Santa Clara, and I will say that, yes, there's been a lot of discussion. So that will continue as well. And that is, SFPUC's set that date and said that publicly. So that will be their decision. Are there any other questions about the proposed budget, the work plan, please? Director Schneider.
This is another one of those dumb questions. So,
No such thing.
well, right now, I think we're looking at a 2.3% increase in what our customers are going to pay in their water rates. And then we're looking at a budget increase of 2.3. Whenever there's a coincidence in numbers, it always makes me, I don't quite get it. So option 2A and 2B are both 2.3%. Is that directly linked to the 2.3% in water increases that our customers are going to pay, or just coincidence that they're both 2.3?
Please.
It's not a coincidence. The number which we had in the prior month was 2.0. We had a little bit of a overall budget increase, the $70,000 budget increase that I mentioned. And so staff just added to its recommendation slightly. It does coincide with what the wholesale water increase is. That's not a coincidence. I was trying to line them up so that we wouldn't be exceeding the wholesale water increase percentage.
So if agency is increasing their fixed costs for that 2.3%, is the customer paying 4.6%? Or 2.3% of the fixed cost and 2.3 over the water cost?
That makes sense.
So BAWSCA's assessment is about 1% of the overall, it's relative to the San Francisco wholesale water payment. So there would be a 2.3% increase on the wholesale water cost and a 2.3% increase of the BAWSCA cost, which is 1% of the water cost.
Okay, thank you.
So overall, if you had the total of the BAWSCA cost, and I know Cal Water has this, but the BAWSCA cost and the wholesale cost together, it would increase by 2.3%.
Okay, I'm not sure last night if we actually talked about those two differences. So, I mean, I can go back and check, but for all of us, when we go back to our hosts, to know that there's too little adjustments.
Right, understanding that all water costs are, worth considering and questioning, and again, we're not beholden to this number. It could be 2.2 or 2.4 or whatever you want. This was a reasonable number that we picked out because it results in in taking money from the reserve. Any number in this range is going to take some money from the reserve. So whatever the board decides, the board policy committee decides is your decision. But we thought it was simpler and made sense to do something in line with what San Francisco did.
Thank you.
Sorry, I got moved. Director Pierce?
Sure, CEO Smagel. When those costs come in, are the BAWSCA costs included in the San Francisco water cost to the agencies, or how does that appear? I'm trying to think, or does it show up or is it that BAWSCA bills the water agencies and then they include it in their costs? So I don't know that it's being an additive cost, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
So it's a separate cost that's billed to the wholesale agencies, except in the case of Cal Water where it's all bundled in by San Francisco.
Does that?
So then our agencies then take those costs into consideration in setting their rates. So it's not like there's an additional rate that is then put on top of your rates, just so I'm not confusing myself and everyone else. Okay.
Sorry about that.
sometimes we confuse ourselves the more we talk. Director Sigerman, please.
Thank you. Question on 2B. So if we elect or recommend 2B instead of 2A with the 66,000 payment included, are we now obligated to make that, or is that an allowance for it that we can decide later if we actually pay it?
Well, and that is the difference, if my understanding is right, between 2A and 2B. 2A would lock us into something, and 2B would give us that option at the end of the, or am I mixing them up? It would give us the option, yeah, the 2B is to be or not to be, now is the question. I'm just kidding. Little Shakespeare. 2B would lock us into that. And 2A leaves open the door and the option of looking at our budget at the end of the year and seeing what we could do.
Thank you.
And
Okay.
that's why staff wanted to hear from us. So if we're up to that point, I'd love to hear from each director, starting with Director Chambers, Chair Chambers, and
Okay, thank you. I really support 2A, because I really don't want to commit to giving the $66,000 immediately. You know, we started the year with a 24% reserve. We're budgeting for a 22% reserve, except earlier on it said we expect to only spend about 90 to 95% of our money from this current year's budget. And in July, that gets rolled over into our reserve. And if we really do only spend 95% of our money, that's going to increase our reserves at the year end to like 27%. And I think if that happens, then I'm happy with giving the 1.2% or $66,000 to reduce our long-term liability. But I can't see doing it right now because I don't know how the end of the year is going to happen. Looking at the market, who knows what's going to happen? It's been so crazy. I just don't want to commit to anything that I don't have to, and so that's why I think 2A is a good move. You know we need the 2.3%, and that'll leave us in the ballpark about 25% at the end of the year after you factor in your money you don't spend for the current year. Thank you.
thank you. Director Sigerman.
Thank you. I really substantially agree. I was really hoping we could push for this CalPERS payment, but given the uncertainties right now, I think we ought to preserve the flexibility and option. But I hope we remember then what we're saying now. We'd really like to pay that down and not forget about it.
Thank you so much. Director Pierce.
Marty?
Oh, wait, we're going to get to you right after Director Pierce, unless you want to go right now. Barbara says go ahead. Louise, please.
Oh, all right, thank you, Barbara. As much as I hate assessments, because these hurt especially the smaller districts more, I know this is something that we cannot overlook, and we have to keep it on the front burner all the time. I also am in agreement of the option 2A, only because besides the option whether to pay or not, there is also the issue of the general reserves. And when we start going into the low 20s on the general reserves, we should pay very, very close attention to that. And this one will keep us at the 22% at least, you know, and then we have the option whether to pay or not. Or we also have, you know, this is an answer to a question that was done earlier. We also have to pay, have the option to pay more if we want to, or if we can. So, you know, basically what we're doing here, we're not reducing the payment as such. We're reducing the length of time for us to pay the entire amount, which we have to. So for me, you know, hearing what the other directors have said and what the CEO said on this, I would go for option 2A.
Thank you so much. Also, did you have any questions or comments on the work plan or the operating budget otherwise?
No, I'm good at that.
Thank you so much. Director Pierce, please.
I like the idea of preserving the ability of choosing later, so I think that 2A works, and then we still have the ability to make that contribution later.
Thank you, Director Pierce. Director Schneider?
2A.
2A.
On that. I do have a dumb question, though, because I haven't been on this. No,
Leave
it's
off
an,
the dumb.
well,
I have a question.
if we drift into a recession, and I know this is all speculative, is that one of the good reasons to make sure that the reserve stays at the 22 to whatever the percentage? I mean, compared to, in the paper today, San Mateo City of is dropping their reserves down to 15%. I think we're in 15 to 20. But in a when you think that a recession is coming, do you beef up your reserves so you got that flexibility? Obviously, I'm 2A. It's the right way to do it, given uncertainty. But even for what Tom Chambers brought up, the flexibility. But I'm just curious, what would happen if we fall into a recession?
Oh,
So-
yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, because we're not an operational,
Right, so we're not an operational agency, as you know. We have the staff that are kind of embedded costs continuing. What I'd say is there's two different things that could hypothetically happen. One is a revenue problem, where a member agency does not pay their assessment. That is one sort of risk to an organization like this on the revenue side. The other is if we have a major expense that we didn't anticipate. And so that could be a legal expense, that could be some other anticipated expense. That's why you tend to keep within these guidelines. I don't know how a recession would relate to either of those two things unless for some reason we think that one of the member agencies or more than one of the member agencies wouldn't pay their assessment for some reason.
Okay.
thank you.
Hopefully that helps.
Please, council.
It's also
Commissioner.
possible to do a mid-year assessment change, which has never been done and is disfavored, but the agency would not be left with the inability to collect more revenue if needed. So we just try to use the reserve to avoid any mid-year assessment changes, smooth things out.
Thank you. Appreciate the help with that. Director Ragsdale.
I guess a question related to that. I know our reserve guidelines are 20 to 35, so I don't even, I think we would have to, I don't know, we did definitely have to go to the board, obviously, but I don't even know if that goes somewhere deeper to deviate below 20, I'm not sure.
I'd defer to Allison, but I think that's the board's own policy
Yeah.
rather than some external policy.
It's 100%. We used to not have a policy that had that specific guideline, but when our reserves got rather large, we chose to adopt a policy.
Okay, so we could change it if we, not suggesting we do, but just to
Yes.
know what that guideline is. And
Yes.
And the assessment last year, was that where we did the 9%? I remember we were choosing between 9 and 10, and we liked 9. That was for the assessment, okay. Excellent, I'm very comfortable with 2A for the reasons eloquently stated by others.
Okay, thank you. Director Duncan, please.
So I like 2A. I think that makes sense, and I would support it. I also think that decreasing these unfunded accrued liabilities is really good policy, and I think there's a case to be made that we should be very transparent about it, and we should go with 5A, so that we just, hey, we're not trying to hide anything, we're not trying to bury anything, this is a good policy, let's do it. But I think we have kind of a consensus that 2A is a better way to go, so I definitely support that.
Thank you so much. I'd like for Christina maybe to weigh in because she has been talking with CalPERS and shared some of the possibilities of this bringing down from 20-year to 10-year, depending on how we handle this. Please.
Sure. So basically, this is in the past several years, BAWSCA has been providing annual pension-funded status report to the board. So definitely, for the next annual report, BAWSCA will work with CalPERS actuary. Hopefully, we will provide sufficient alternative options for the BPC and the board to consider in terms of options to make a different level of ADPs targeting a shorter amortization period
moving forward.
Thank you, appreciate that. Well, some of you have alluded to the roller coaster ride we call the economy. But I know during the pandemic, our city had to lower down to 15% our reserves. And that was a very painful place to be because we are operational, and knowing an earthquake or some other catastrophe could really cause problems. And I'm glad that all the directors are thinking along those lines of, okay, why do we have a reserve and what is its purpose? Because that's important to know why we would need to keep it about where we're on the lower end of what our own personal, or when I shouldn't say personal, our operational situation looks good. So I too liked to have the 2A where we have the option, and then we can true that up at the end of the year, and we could possibly do more. But maybe having that 66,000 as a goal. And staff has heard this, and Christina, who handles our finances very well, has understood that. And as I had her mention, she has been in contact with CalPERS because, as Director Duncan said, paying down a liability is a smart financial decision. So I appreciate everyone weighing in. Do I have, I should go to the public now. Would the public have any questions or like to weigh in on this? Please come forward.
Thanks, Tom. So Dave Warner, I first just really admire the fact that you went around the room and asked each person for what they felt and why. That's impressive. The other thing I want to say, just from a math perspective, is my understanding, and I don't know the exact numbers, but a 2.3% increase in our water rates takes our wholesale rate from $5.67. It probably adds, 13 or 14 cents to our water rate. When we increase BAWSCA's amount that we pay BAWSCA by 2.3%, that maybe increases our overall water rate a penny or less than a penny. It's just such a small proportion of what we pay. So my point, 2 points here. One is, I'm a former CFO. From a control perspective, it's great to see this kind of discussion watching our costs. From a consumer perspective, I am so much more worried about the 13 or 14 cents than I am worried about the less than the 1 cent. And so in the work plan, it'd be great if there could be more on fleshing out the affordability part about, such as, what will rates look like under different demand scenarios, and what can we do to try to manage rates, and what are there options there? And this work plan, it seems like it's very similar to what the prior CEO had, and I hope that Mr. Smegel will, GM Smegel will, CEO Smegel will put more of his imprimatur on these kind of things going forward. But it would just suggest if there's any chance of pulling out the finance side more so that you guys spend as much time or more time on the bigger finance issues as much as you spend on this control issue. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate that. I don't see any. Do I have a motion? Director Zuckerman.
Thank you. I would move that the committee recommend the board adoption of proposed fiscal year 25-6 work plan and the results to be achieved with a proposed operating budget of $5,547,732 and recommending a funding plan option 2A.
Thank you. Do I have a second to that? Director Chambers?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other discussion? Anyone from the public want to discuss the motion? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Oh, I should ask Director Vila.
No public. No
Okay,
public
thank
here.
you. Got to remember the voice from above.
All right, on the motion, Director Hardy,
Yes.
Director Ragsdale,
Yes.
Director Chambers,
Yes.
Director Duncan,
Yes.
Director Pierce,
Yes.
Director Schneider,
Yes.
Director Vella,
Yes.
and Director Zichterman.
Yes.
That's unanimous.
And that passes unanimously. Thank you so much. That will be a recommendation that will go to the rest of the board at the next meeting in May. Okay, we will move on to 5B, approval and adoption of the pay schedules.
Great. So, as you're probably familiar with from last fall, BAWSCA is required to adopt annually the publicly available pay schedules for the staff. So that requires board action. We're coming to the Board Policy Committee for recommendation to the board that they adopt the pay schedule. And the difference between the pay schedule for 25-26 as compared to last year is a 2.08% increase in all categories. That's the CPIU increase that keeps the pay schedules in line with inflation, plus the 1.8% increase in the category of the senior water resources specialist, and that was approved by the board at the last meeting. And so we will have another approval of a pay schedule coming in September at the board meeting as a result of the change in the CEO compensation. That's not considered here, and although that is contractual, there is usually some discretion by the board on the CEO pay. We happen to have a multi-year contract at the moment, so there isn't as much discretion for September, but there will be another publication of the pay schedules in September.
Not the smartest.
So that is our recommendation, that the committee
Wonderful.
recommend adoption.
Thank you so much. Director Schneider, please.
I have to figure out how I can say this. I'm fine with the salaries. I am curious of the layoffs that may or may not happen at the federal level, opening up a huge number of talent pool, although I recognize that this, who we hire, is a very, selective is not the right word, specialized, very specialized group in there. And then reading through how, the internship program, which usually we're thinking of as college interns, but I wonder if we've got enough flexibility in this, that if those federal layoffs, I hope they don't, but if they become permanent, there might be some lovely talent that we could use to fill in some of those salary gaps on that. So I'm just throwing that out there. In my field, it's a small field. Water, I think, is probably is a much smaller field than garbage on that. But there could be some real talent out there that we could snap up. So just laying that out there as an idea. Just an awful lot of things happening in this last couple of months with no idea how to absorb them on that.
As I always say, my crystal ball isn't working well, so I don't know how it's going to turn out. But yeah, that's a good point, not knowing what or whom is out there. But I think at this point we are staffed. Please.
What I was going to say is we do periodic salary evaluations. That's what we did last fall to get to a determination that one category of staff was below median by 1.8%. So we'll continue to do those on a periodic basis. I think that's every other year. I'm not sure who knows that, Tom. Every 2 years we typically do that. If there's some major reason in the economy to do that again more quickly, I'm sure the board could bring that up. But our normal policy is to do that every other year.
In my previous life, working for the University of California and teaching, I would get a lot of PhDs who got laid off from usually military industries in Silicon Valley, and then they were job changing. So I actually had interns with master's degrees or PhDs. It's just something to consider depending on what may happen. Just throwing that out there.
Thank you. That opens the door to lots of possibilities. Director Zuckerman.
Thank you. I will continue to press for more increases. I don't know how the CPI can come out at 2.08% in this. What planet is that on? Anyway, but I'm totally support these changes and would just suggest that as everybody's tightening their belts, we're finding really good luck with temps. We just hired a CAD drafter, temp, and an environmental engineer, temp. That's no benefits, little markup for workers' comp kinds of things. If you want to relieve workload and you can't increase staff compensation, at least relieve their workload by sharing it. And so that can really be a factor. And it's not much of a budget buster to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that perspective because that helps. As always has been said, water is very specific and it is a niche market, and sometimes it can be a very small pool, literally, that we're pulling from. Thank you so much. Do I have any other, Director Schneider, okay. Are there any comments, or I always joke because I work for the school district, pay schedules when you work for the public sector, it's like living in a fishbowl. Everybody knows what you make. So the reality is, it's not a big secret. But I do appreciate that we've worked very hard to make certain that we are in line and make certain that we are able to keep our wonderful staff and not lose that brain trust and that institutional knowledge, which becomes very, very precious. Any other questions, comments? I'm open to a motion. Director Schneider.
I can second it if somebody's faster. I don't have
Well, the committee action request is that the committee recommend the board approval of the pay schedule. Yes. Is that okay? All right, that is so moved. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Louise.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Are there any comments on that? Do we have anyone from the public? Do not see anything. All right, we'll take a roll call vote.
Director Hardy,
Yes.
Director Ragsdale,
Yes.
Director Chambers,
Yes.
Director Duncan,
Yes.
Director Pierce,
Yes.
Director Schneider,
Yes.
Director Vella,
Yes.
and Director Zichterman.
Yes.
Thank you. And that appears to have been unanimous and passed. And that's another recommendation that will go on to the rest of the committee in the next meeting. Next, second amendment to Hanson Bridgett Professional Services Contract.
All right, thank you. So our third action item for today is asking the BBC for a recommendation to the board to increase the Hanson Bridgett contract by $80,000. Some background, initial contract amount was $880,000 entered into at the beginning of the fiscal year. The contract was amended in December to include the amounts that were spent on the recruiter to find a new, to go through the new CEO recruitment process. That the board, was explained to the board in January. I did that on my authority in December, and so that's why it was done there in December. This second amendment is due to an increased workload for a variety of purposes, which I'll get into in a moment. And it would increase our overall Hanson Bridgett budget to $985,000 from $905,000 where it is presently. So it results from unanticipated legal services provided during the year on a continuing basis. The first bullet relates to the extended negotiation of the water supply agreement that has gone on longer and more intensively than probably was anticipated for the beginning of the fiscal year. So that has raised costs. In addition, the issue that we just discussed as it percolated last fall was an issue that took up Hanson Bridgett time to address the pay schedule issue and CalPERS because the pay schedules were not in CalPERS preferred format up to and retroactively for the last 5 or 10 years. The third bullet here relates to contracting for Nicole's services to help the agency in her retirement. There was some difficulty and additional negotiations around that, and finally setting up some of the aspects of the contract with me. I will say that the last 3 of those 4 bullets were completely unanticipated because at the beginning of the fiscal year, it was not known that Nicole was going to retire. And so that wasn't contemplated in the budget at all. And that's partly why those big items are here now and being requested. As far as our financial impact on making this adjustment to the Hanson Bridgett contract, we do not staff does not request a change in the overall budget of the organization. Funds are available from a couple of outside contractors where the scope of their work for the year was not what was anticipated. And so we're not recommending a change to the overall 24-25 budget to accommodate this. So looking for a recommendation from the committee for the board to approve this contract amendment with Hanson Bridgett.
Thank you so much. An unusual situation. Legal costs went up. Oh, she said with sarcasm. But the good news is that our contractors cost us a little bit less. And so this looks like just a robbing Robert and Peter to pay Paul situation, moving this around. And so this is the request from staff that this be approved. Any questions? Please, Director Pierce.
Well, and I was jumping the gun. I was going to a motion, so I'll wait and see if anybody has questions.
Okay.
I think the thing that I always find interesting is that we don't have our own in-house lawyer, and we have, what's even better, we have a really skilled, knowledgeable group that represents us. And so every time the numbers get big, people sometimes go, oh my God, but this is a contract. And it's like, no, this is our work, and that's what costs. And the new expenses were things that, as you mentioned, Tom, were not anticipated.
Yes, thank you so much. Director Zuckerman.
Thank you. Despite the chair's comment, you know, Allison's sitting right next to you.
I know. I took my life in my hands.
I approve a lot of attorneys' fees in our business. I think we get our money's worth, and this is fine with me.
Thank you so much. Director Schneider.
Again, I have no problems with this. However, it's how to explain it to them. And I'm wondering if there's a way to take what you just said, what's in the staff report and what's in the slide, in a letter format that might go to city councils that ultimately have that. I don't know if we've done that. I'm just thinking that I go home, I call the city manager, I say this is what happened, and then I may get it wrong. But if there was something in writing that I could work from, because I got a talking to last night by that city council. So I just want to show them that it's for good reasons, but they have no idea of the details. So it's nothing to do with the work. It's how to tell the people who are actually paying the bills that it's worth it.
Right. Helping with that possibly is this does not change our overall budget.
Right, no, see, that's it. I mean, and I was thinking here, writing the memo saying, would that be the top line or the bottom line or the top and the bottom line on that? Because, you know, former elected, sometimes they read their packet and sometimes they don't. And right now they're in a fighting mood out there. If you guys haven't gone back to your councils, they're like, they want their pound of flesh.
Yeah, well, and I joke how many times I'm in a council meeting and someone will ask a question and I'm thinking, that was on page 4. Did you not read that?
Absolutely. I mean, I can try to do it from here, but
Right.
finance is not my specialty, and I hate to think that I make a mistake.
Well,
So-
my thought
Talking
is,
points
first
are-
off, this is just a recommendation that will go to the board. And we have a staff that writes really good minutes. And you could lift that right out of the
Perfect.
minutes from either this meeting or from the
Okay.
BAWSCA meeting,
I
unless you had another thought.
No, I was going to say that exact same thing. In addition, we prepare a summary of the board meetings that you can take back to your agency or city or company, as the case may be. And so that is also another
Yeah.
document.
Good, good, thank you.
I appreciate that. Director Chambers, please. Yeah, please turn on that.
I just wanted to say that Hanson Bridgett was fantastic when they're trying to get Nicole retired and arranging the transition. And we had no idea this was coming at the beginning of the year. And they have been great and they need to be paid. Thank
I
you.
would agree. And it was explained to me many years ago, a good lawyer will fight like anything to keep you out of court. And when you do have to go to court, they fight like anything for you. So I appreciate that, because
Yeah,
I
if I
feel
may.
like that's what we get. Please, Luis.
Yes, a question for the CEO. I know that you are, justifying this because of the savings from other outside help that we have. Is that guarantee? In other words, is Peter going to change his mind when we're trying to pay Paul?
No, so Tom and I work together. Tom has a number of consultants that work on CIP issues and other things, and they're there in case something gets really complicated, in case we need that extra support, and we budget for that every year, because from time to time, those complicated items do come up. And it happens that in this year, admittedly, that's so far this year, nothing has happened on that order. Part of it is that the CIP process for San Francisco is a biannual process. It's kind of an every other year. So the cost goes up and down depending on which year of the two it is. And we've been in an interim state, and the interim changes that they made to the CIP were not significant.
So would you project like a wash on this?
Yeah, we would project a wash on this, yes.
Okay, all right, cool.
Thank you. Allison, please. Ms. Schutte, I should say, be more
Right.
specific.
Thank you for those kind comments. I appreciate them. I also wanted to mention, in addition to the contracts that Tom identified, we also always appropriate a small amount of funds for our bond council in case questions arise on our bonds. And this year, I don't think we used any of that, but it is something that's budgeted for every year and often is not used or not completely exhausted. And so there are quite a few consultant contracts out there.
Thank you so much. In so many ways, I think BAWSCA does a really good job of streamlining, getting so much for the public's dollar, and I will say that. And maybe other government entities could take a page from that and watch things as carefully as we try to. Wonderful. Now I'm open to a motion then, if there's a recommendation to the board. Director Zigerman?
I guess I'm doing motions. I propose that the BPC recommended the board of the committee that the board authorize the CEO General Manager to amend the professional services contract with Hanson and Bridgett by $80,000 for a total not to exceed amount of $985,000.
Thank you so much. Do I have a second to that?
I think Barbara.
Oh.
I think Barbara was going to second.
Oh, I was going to do it, but if you wanted to, Lou, you can.
No, Barbara, please do, because I know you.
I love when
Second.
we have arguments in real time, but in outer space.
No,
Okay,
no.
Director Pierce has seconded
Yeah,
that.
please.
Luis, did you want to talk on the motion? No? Okay.
No, I'm good.
Wanted to
Thank
make
you.
certain, because I can't.
No, what I was going to say is that Director Pierce was going to make the motion, so since Director Zichterman did it, it stands to reason that Director Pierce should second. That's all.
Louis,
Thank you.
she's losing her voice. She pointed to me.
They're sitting next to each other. You may or not know that, and we don't want a fist fight. Thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, I have a motion and a second. Do I have any other discussion or questions? Do I have anyone from the public? I do not see anything. Then we'll take a roll call vote.
Director Hardy,
Yes.
Director Ragsdale,
Yes.
Director Chambers,
Yes,
Director Duncan,
Yes?
Director Pierce,
Yes,
Director Schneider,
Yes.
Director Vella,
Yes.
Director Zichterman.
Yes.
Wonderful. That passes, and those recommendations will go on to our next meeting with the full board. We're up to 6A. I believe I'm going to say it, Ashwari. Did I say it right? Yeah. Good.
Thank you.
Trying to be official since we're online. Megan,
Good
thank
afternoon,
you.
directors. I'm happy to discuss how BAWSCA is advancing the development of Strategy 2050, focusing on long-term water supply reliability. This relates to the risk assessment and scenario planning, which I will be discussing with you all today. But this will also be discussed next month during the board meeting as well. So the goals for today's meeting are to provide an update on Strategy 2050 development. We'll also highlight the context for scenario planning and its role for Strategy 2050. And then we're going to be requesting some input from you all on some of the key drivers of change and uncertainty in the BAWSCA region, which is also some of those questions can be found in the board memo. And this is really the first step before our presentation during the May board meeting. Just get all of these out here. So we spent the last fiscal year developing that scope of work for Strategy 2050, where we first began with identifying that purpose, which was to identify the water supply management needs and opportunities for the BAWSCA region and establish a framework to collectively support water reliability and resilience. From there, we really received a lot of input and information from the agencies, from the water management representatives, from your agencies to develop these 6 Strategy 2050 objectives to achieve that purpose. Now, these 6 objectives are in addition to BAWSCA's work to oversee the water supply agreement, and the objectives really align with BAWSCA's goal of a reliable supply of high-quality water at a fair price. I won't go through each of these. We will be focusing this later on in the Strategy 2050 development, but they really touch on regional dialogue and collaboration, funding, affordability, regulations, and regional water supply reliability. So today, we're going to focus on that first one. We're currently focusing on that first objective to provide a comprehensive picture of the region's supply and demand management needs and options. And our goal is to develop this plan for advancing all of these objectives. And to do that, we really need to understand how to quantify those needs, evaluate some potential actions moving forward, and determine what BAWSCA's role might be in that, and then identify an implementation plan if needed. So this could be for 2 years from now, 20 years from now. These are options that we can look at, not just this year and next year, but 10, 20 years down the line if something occurs. In order for BAWSCA to provide this comprehensive picture of the region's supply and demand management needs and options, we're using supply planning, and this will be applied to evaluate that water supply and demand management reliability. And what that specifically is it's a structured approach to envision what a possible future scenarios might look like, and then identify some of these key drivers of change. It's similar to what we used during our last demand study with a sensitivity analysis, where we look at different things that impact water demand. This is on the water supply reliability side, where we're considering many possible combinations of external forces that impact member agencies' ability to meet their future needs and customers. And that can touch on environmental, societal, regulatory, and socioeconomic outcomes for water supply reliability. And that goal is to really establish how these drivers link to the availability of and need for water in the Bay Area. And so these scenarios will be used to conduct what we call a risk assessment for water supply shortages. And it will help long-term in our planning and figuring out some of these intervention and investments in the future. And again, these scenarios are not to definitively map out and plan specific projects for the future. It will be used to really better understand what the future might look like. So we have all the tools really necessary to make those insightful decisions to meet our needs. The first step to identify those drivers of change is to kind of look at what those drivers are, right? And so we actually held a WMR scenario planning session back in February of 19th, which was really helpful. And we broke out into 5 separate groups, and each group first identified what risks are impacting water supply reliability, that this is both currently and in the future, and both at a local level, at a local agency level, and regionally. And they then took that list of risks and placed them on these axes. So the uncertainty being on the x-axis and impact on the y. And I'll just go through 1 or 2 examples. We see on the left top, aging infrastructure. We have more of an understanding or certainty that this is going to be occurring, but the impact is going to be pretty large with that. So, you know, we have a better plan for what that might look like. Now on the right side, top right side, you know, looking at multi-year drought, there's a lot more uncertainty with that. And this is actually an example. This is a sample produced by one of the breakout groups during the workshop. So we know that it's going to have a large impact, but that uncertainty of that is a little less understood. So what was interesting with this is we actually identified over 50 drivers. The agencies had a long list of different things that are impacting all of your agencies. And the list is actually in front of you. We printed it out. So this is really interesting to see. And we broke it out into climate, affordability, funding, demands, regulatory, and this other group as well. And the drivers in bold are the ones identified in that top right quadrant. So those are the ones that are, you know, high uncertainty, high impact. And the drivers with an asterisk next to it are the ones that were actually discussed in more than 4 of the groups out of the 5. So it was really important to most of the people at that planning session. The information we got from the agencies were summarized into 8 groups. So these are the water supply risks with the greatest impact and uncertainty. We see that being funding, climate change, state-issued restrictions, drought, Bay Delta Plan, demand changes, affordability, and state and federal infrastructure development. Now the demand changes, that's something that we're tying into with our demand study, so looking at what those demands might look like. Hopefully we'll get kind of a preliminary numbers, those numbers at the end of this fiscal year that we're going to be tying into this work. But the next thing we wanted to do is, you know, how are we going to measure these risks and be able to model them out in the scenario planning? So we kind of like brainstormed on, okay, what are these risks and how can we group them together? What are these primary factors of change? Where do we see patterns and similarities? What's in common with all of these? So we can kind of develop these future planning scenarios to really make sure we represent all of those main drivers of change. And on the bottom, we actually put down some of these other ones too. So the other risk that may be more certain but could have great impact is that aging infrastructure, as well as some of these water quality and regulations. And what we came up with is kind of like 3 thematic uncertainty groups, which kind of will put together that access for the what's going to be the scenario matrix. And I'm not going to go into kind of the discussion on the scenario planning, what those look like. That's going to be during the board meeting in May. But we did break it down into supply availability and that could include droughts, climate change, the Bay Delta Plan, and the state-issued restrictions or water quality concerns. And then we have the regional development, and so that's housing development, jobs, population and housing density. And then we always, in the back of our mind, are also looking at this water rates and affordability. This is tying into the demand study, so how rates are impacting demand, but we're also going to tie it into some of these affordability work that we're doing for Strategy 2050. So this is where the fun begins. We had the February 19th planning session with the agencies, and we continued some of this discussion with each of your agencies during both the March and the recent April WMR meetings to really go through those drivers of change and ways we can kind of develop these future scenarios of water reliability. But before we go ahead and discuss kind of like the specific scenarios we had in mind, which we will be going through during the May board meeting, we really wanted to kind of request some further information and input from all of you on the following questions, so we can kind of make sure we're not missing anything. It's really important for us to collaborate with the BAWSCA agency staff and the board on Strategy 2050 as we're moving along with it. We're also gathering input from outside stakeholders. There's going to be a stakeholder meeting May 20th. I have not sent that email out, but we already have a room ready for that, and we're working with our consultants on that. But we're going to be inviting NGOs, BAWSCA agencies, and other agencies within the Bay Area, wastewater entities, and others to really discuss some of these projects, programs, and policies that might come out of this. So we're really trying to put that out there and get that information from all. But we're really hoping at this moment to gather some more input and information from you all on these three questions. So what major challenges do you foresee for the BAWSCA region over the next 25 years? What potential risks or drivers could impact economic growth within the region over the next 25 years? And this can kind of tap into some of these drivers that we have on the sheet that I had provided you. And then what types of data or information can we look at, or projections would be really most helpful for us as we inform relevant regional policy decisions? So I'm going to keep it open right now and see if anyone has any input.
Well, I'm going to say this is another one where we're trying to take in information. I'd like to go around to each member of the committee. We can start on either side. Director Chambers, you ready to go, or do you want me to come back? You seem to still be writing. Oh, okay. He's tossed the gauntlet to the side. Director Schneider, you ready to make some comments? So this is big.
My main question is on sensitivity analysis. And what does that really mean? Is it sensitivity for an agency to pay? Obviously, we have one supply of water, we must pay. Therefore, whatever happens, we pay, versus what our end customer has to pay. And then, because climate change is on here, if I was just looking at this really quickly, it's talking about earthquake, wildflowers, obviously water there. But a bigger concern, I think, for a lot of us is heat waves and our aging population and young children and their sensitivity locked at home to heat waves. During COVID, I participated with my university, a lot of webinars on climate change, and I thought, wow, let's plant a lot of trees. Some of you've got great tree coverage. Some of us don't. The farther you move up the peninsula, the fewer the trees. But UCLA professor came back and he said, and yeah, but that'll take 20 years to see a benefit. We should be doing things like painting your roofs white with particular paint, blah, blah, blah. But heat waves, half of my agency coverage area is at high risk to heat waves right now. And they are our low-income population. So what does sensitivity really mean? What I have seen happen is people have to pay for their shower and their toilet, but they'll let everything outside die, which increase our fire risk. So one thing goes on to another thing. So they may end up paying for it, but what we're going to end up is dead plants, which is why I meant to ask if, and I think I've asked in the past, and maybe Maria did too, if we had a workshop that talked about plants that retain water, because one of your fire assessments, one of the things they measure if you're a high fire risk is the water content of plants. So it's a whole new thing. Water content of plants is now a new thing. I mean, it's always been there, but now we have to plan for it. And I would love to tell my residents, you must do X, Y, Z. And maybe that will help with the sensitivity. So this all sounds great and wonderful, but I think it's missing heat waves. Wastewater is a whole other thing. The more we harden our environment, especially those of us who live in the hills, the more the people in the lowlands are going to flood, period. So where does green infrastructure and that happen? And I've seen it happen in my own city. People come from San Francisco, they're used to a cement environment, they come to my community, and they cement everything. And that creates 3 or 4 other risks on that. So that's my maybe build out what sensitivity means.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. And
thank you.
I think we're looking at, kind of like an envelope of possibilities, right? Where we look at kind of that high supply availability, low, and then what you're touching upon is kind of like a more stable or more development and what we can kind of tie into each of those factors.
It's getting us to that place of resiliency. And I think, we'll all talk, a lot of people talk climate change and don't really realize how expensive it's going to be. And how do we move from recycling to resiliency work on that? But I think it's lovely and confusing. And I'm taking a map class right now, and I'm just going, ooh, how can I play with this?
So
Because visuals can really help tell a story.
Not to interrupt, but what I'm hearing is sort of secondary effects of the decisions that we make and the policies that we consider. That's something that I'm hearing, right?
In addition to that,
Follow the.
We're
Right.
trying to give just some direction.
well, the same
stuff.
thing, the same thing that happens to SFPUC when we all use less water is there's less money for fixed cost. We have the same thing within each of our agencies too. And I'm sure that's in here, but it needs to be in here.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe,
please.
maybe just if I could just add, so some of you perhaps don't quite grasp what we mean by sensitivity analysis, and I'll spend just a quick few minutes or minute or two saying, so if you can think about trying to evaluate how reliable our water supply is, maybe in 20 years, there could be one future where we're just booming in terms of an economy, and we are growing in terms of our housing, and it's not a problem. We have plenty of water supply. So the economy's great, we have a lot of water, and we can evaluate how reliable our supply is based on that future. Another future could be we are booming as an economy, but we are really having problems with our water supplies. We don't have adequate water supply. And what are we going to do? Because we know this is our demand. So that's another future. So the sensitivity analysis says, under different types of futures, what do we as a group need to do relative to our water supply? So if we're in a big booming economy, but our water supply is really poor, what do we need to do? That discussion then is kind of found out by the work we're doing. Similarly, if we don't have any issues at all meeting our water supply needs and we're booming, that's kind of another future. Maybe we as a collective don't need to invest so much. And this is to help guide BAWSCA, us around the table, our staff and you as our board, try to help us have a roadmap in place for what we need to do as an agency in the future. Collectively, what BAWSCA needs to do to support you folks in the room and your agencies who you represent. So the sensitivity analysis that we're going to look at is looking at all these different types of risks. Like, for example, what if we find that we need a whole lot of funding? Maybe that's a risk that our agencies have said, how are we going to afford for all this work we need to do? We risk, perhaps Millbrae risks not being able to collect enough revenue to afford all the infrastructure needs that they set. That's a risk we want you to consider, BAWSCA. Another risk might be regulatory risks. The Bay Delta Plan, if it comes in play, and we're required, or San Francisco has a 40% unimpaired flow requirement, we're worried that during a drought, we're not gonna have enough water supply. So BAWSCA, we want you to consider that risk in your assessment. So I just wanted to try to relay that out. Our risk assessment looks at a bunch of possible futures and then kind of helps guide under various futures what type of approach the agency should do, and hopefully an adaptable approach to different futures, because it's uncertain. So let's make sure BAWSCA's approach is adaptable. So I just wanted to interject there in case there was some questions.
Into the microphone. We need
It was
to
just saying, end of the line, it's affordability and the perception of affordability. And it differs depending on our socioeconomics.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that. Director Axdale.
This list is amazing and thinks of everything in the greater category. So I had a couple of things which I think will slide into categories you already have. I don't have any new categories to offer. But going on what Tom Francis was saying with regard to funding for infrastructure, challenge is obviously grants that we may be hoping to get and maybe we can't get in with the current federal administration and even with the state, because they're not getting things from federal, or people aren't making as much money, paying as much taxes. So just the ability to fund infrastructure projects. And we all have aging infrastructure under our streets. One thing that I know we have worked on in Hillsborough is trying not to waste the good water. When you have a big storm, I'm sure something we all think about, but that's something that if people are able to do that, that helps with the supply.
Stormwater capture.
Yes, there we go. See, it has a name. And then under housing regulations, which you already have all the great categories. Just in terms of affecting demand, I know that in Carmel, they're very particular about water, and if you, they really limit what you can use. I guess you know this more, but what you, oh no, could you, yeah. It's Cal American. It's Cal American down there. Sorry, Cal-Am. Sorry about that. Anyway, very particular about how much water you can use if you do a remodel, et cetera. So if we all adopted that, then that would change the demand if people all have the low flow everything, and in any remodels you're allowed to use less water. But again, that goes under your housing regulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I would agree. When I first saw this, I went, who did this? It's beautiful. Wonderful. Director Duncan, please. If you could weigh in for our staff.
I would have to agree that aging infrastructure is a big concern. I think when you look at the Bay Area, a lot of it was built right after World War II. When you look at 2050, a lot of this is going to be 100-year-old. We have 100-year-old pipes. How is that going to impact everything? When's that day going to come when we have so many leaks on these systems that it starts to become the #1 issue? And I'm not sure how this all fits together, but I like that you have aging infrastructure on there, because I think that, to me, is the #1 concern.
Thank you. Director Chambers, you ready?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I agree with aging infrastructure, and our pipes are getting that way because we need some pipes. So that's an issue. I also like, demand management, you have elasticity. It's really price elasticity. The prices goes up, that's going to affect our demand forecast, because demand really drives capital improvements, which drives affordability and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's important. Another issue, it sure would be nice to get per capita usage down on some of the high sides. I know my district's really low, And that's, I guess, key to that is conservation. And it can happen from densification, which you have under demands, but I think conservation and what we can do to reduce demand to resolve our water supply problems would be important. And so I don't want to give up on our conservation bit. But I guess that's the main thing. I guess that's about all I have.
Thank you so much. Director Zuckerman.
Maybe I'm taking a little different tack, but I think this is really getting at so many areas. It's really thorough. So thanks for putting all of this together. I think the ticket here is going to be what comes out of all this. And I'm looking, I think, hoping for two things. One, that we collectively, BAWSCA agencies, can get to San Francisco for their planning for our water, a very realistic projection of demand. Not everybody be as conservative as you possibly can so that all of us had our conservatisms up and now we're up to where they've been unrealistically planning for. What is it really? Look at the last decade or two, not 50 years. Our water increases are not going to go up with population at the same rate. We're using a lot less water. Our toilets don't flush 5 gallons a minute every flush now. It's 1. Build those into our projections. Be realistic. These conservatisms are building on each other. So I hope we can do that. The second is, what's our risk tolerance? Do we really need San Francisco to assure us that in the 3rd and 4th and 5th year and 6th year and 7th year of a drought, we're going to have this amount of water that we think we use every day? Or are we willing to think about a risk tolerance which is a little more realistic because we want to look at the costs of building all that infrastructure to assure us of those improbable events? We want to avoid the costs for doing all of that. We're willing to tolerate a little more risk. That's just risk management. We've been hearing this from our public commenters. I think it's time we get real about risk tolerance. If we can get to San Francisco collectively a good number of what we think we're going to need and how much we're willing to tolerate for risks if we get a big drought, I think that'll go a long way to maybe helping with some of this pressure that they're under to make sure we don't fall short ever. I think being a little less conservative, I'm an engineer, we might have this much growth in population. We might have all those people using this much water, conservatism on conservatism. And that's where I think a lot of agencies have gotten in trouble overbuilding. The demands just aren't there. Look at, we're flatlined in water demand, even decreasing substantially because of a lot of retrofitting that we've done. So water growth rates compared to population aren't going to be the same as they were 30 years ago. Let's get real. So I'm hoping we come out of that. I can't wait to participate in some of these sessions, work sessions. I hope they're really work sessions. All these other things about other aspects like replacing aging infrastructure, I'm spending millions a year on. We're all looking at 50, 70-year-old infrastructure. We got to build that in. But the crux of it is, what do we want to tell San Francisco about being real with us about providing our water?
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Director Pierce, please.
I think when I was thinking, there are 2 levels of infrastructure. One of them is the water infrastructure that all of our cities have and that San Francisco has. There's all of the public infrastructure that has been built into all of the houses, and all of that stuff at some point will need to be replaced, I assume. And I wonder about how we're looking at how we communicate and interact with the businesses and the communities, because that can be very uncertain. Are we controlling the behavior through legal requirements? Is it informal regulations, enforcement? How do we communicate it to make sure that if all of our goal is one thing, we can get our residents and our businesses to comply with that? And what will it take to make that to make that happen. And I'm really excited about all of the information that you've got here, and I think that this will be a really interesting discussion, so thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Director Schneider, did you have another comment? Yeah, I was going to.
I wanted to build on Tom, but I can wait.
Okay. Luis. Wakey.
Me?
Yes,
Yes,
please.
Thank you. Absolutely, yes. I'm looking at it a little bit from a more simplistic approach, maybe hopefully not too simplistic. So, based on the presentation that we just saw from our staff, we know that BAWSCA is there for what? For reliability, for high quality, and for price. That's it. I could have a very aging infrastructure in my district, and BAWSCA can do nothing for that. So that's going to be my responsibility. And the question is, what major challenges do you foresee for the BAWSCA region and what BAWSCA can do over the next 25 years? To me, I think the biggest challenge is going to be the price. Why do I say that? I think it's going to be price because with the reliability, we have gone through droughts, very severe droughts, and we have gone through recently 3 wet years, okay? And the history is going to repeat itself. And I think that the population of our region that BAWSCA foresees has been trained, even psychologically, to conserve and to do with less water. The quality of the water, I think that we have achieved high quality and there is no reason why it should not be maintained. So I think that the challenge for BAWSCA is going to be how are we going to put SFPUC's feet to the fire to keep the prices down. That is what kills us, especially for the smaller district. For the smaller districts and for the smaller agencies, when it comes to water, most of our budget goes to water purchase. So that's what's going to be my approach on this.
No, I appreciate that. I have 2 other directors that wanted to weigh in again. Director Schneider.
Thank you. I appreciate, Tom, what you said. And I'm going to go back to my long-winded, because I got called on first. You talked about historically now we're saving water because the technology has changed and how we use it. And I agree. And I think that that's a real clean way to structure the conversation. But then, and I keep harping on this, my customers stopped using water outside completely, and that causes additional damage. So how would you articulate it? Because you did it so well. How do we maintain adequate outdoor use? Like I kind of say, we wanted to get rid of lawns. Well, you know what? In a drought, just don't water the darn thing. Great, you save all the water you need during a drought. Wet year, it comes back. But if you plant shrubs, then you got to keep them. And then I have a friend at East Bay Mud, and her lecture was throughout all the droughts we've been through is water your trees. So how can you articulate what's in my head?
Well, the gauntlet has been thrown down. Director Sigurd.
2 ways. Plant selection really helps in deciding how much water you need to keep that green and to avoid the fire risks. That's a real obvious danger risk. We have to avoid planting things that die without our artificial watering of them. So that's one. And the other really is just trying to make sure that we keep people being not just our infrastructure, our low flow fixtures being used, but the behavior side. That we have a mindset. We've had 3 good wet years, but I don't see a lot of people like we did 10 and 20 years ago showering for 10 minutes and forgetting about their lawns, running down the street when they're irrigating. I think we've come a long way in changing some of those behaviors. So those would be my thoughts. Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate. I've been taking notes.
I did have one more thought, though, if I could.
Please, yes.
So in this approach or area, of getting something back to SFPUC on realistic demand projections and our maybe increased tolerance of risk, raising the bar a little bit for ourselves. Would be one other area of advice or questioning to SFPUC, and that is, what are you doing about storage? Instead of alternative supplies, we need to take all the water we are out of the Tuolumne, and we need to develop all these new supplies at great cost. Maybe we have enough water, and if you look at the amount of water that SFPUC and the irrigation districts have had to dump in heavy years, compared to the shortage of drought years when we were short water, we had to cut back 20%, 10%, 20%. If you do that math, I bet overall, over a few decades, we probably had enough water. We just had to let it go when we had too much snow melt, and then we were short a few years later when we had two back-to-back 3 or 4 year droughts. I think more storage, have they really looked hard enough at increasing the storage rather than building all kinds of new infrastructure, new alternative supplies? I think local supplies are really valuable. We all ought to have some groundwater wells, bank the groundwater in these wet years, tap it a little bit more when you have dry years, because San Francisco's cutting us back a little bit. But balancing those local alternatives instead of building whole new infrastructure systems, I think would really help. And I don't think it's as tough to get more storage. It's the answer for California. Hopefully Sites Reservoir will get built. Calaveras got raised. Can we do a little bit more on storage to buffer that 3rd, 4th, 5th year and decrease the cutbacks that we're having to face now when you guys do your urban water management plans and you can't get housing projects approved because you can't guarantee the water in droughts is going to be adequate for those new developments? You're stuck. We're stuck. We can unstick that by more storage. So I just thought I'd throw that into something to consider in our 2050 planning.
Thank you
I've
so
spoken
much. Now, I built all this up. I've been taking too many notes. I will say, on the plants, I'm going to say California native. That really makes the point to me because that's what works here and understands our wet years, our dry years, and everything in between. On BAWSCA, and I know our city website as well has a lot of those links to help with that. So that's there for our residents. To your point, water is easy to store, hard to move. Electricity is easier to move and hard to store. And that's why when we made so much infrastructure that was hydroelectric, that made that very hard, because you've got two competing realities. There's the engineer part of me. My husband and I have joked, when you talked about planning ahead, I teased my husband, he should have been the one to do the packing list for the space shuttle because he wouldn't forget anything, because we're both engineers. But the reality is, to me, reliability is where we put a lot of our focus, because it doesn't matter if there's high quality and at any price if there is no water. And I appreciate that there's so much emphasis on the reliability. When we talk about the aging infrastructure, I was thinking of my mother's favorite comment. I asked her how she was doing. She said, "It's really frustrating when the warranty on your parts wears out." And I would agree with that. And we need to look at our infrastructure, our water infrastructure, in the same way, because a lot of it was built right after World War II when we had such a boom. And recognizing then it will possibly get really old about the same time. I read a very interesting piece. It said, conservation isn't sexy, it doesn't make headlines, but it works. And I found that, yeah, it's nothing flashy at all. But we also recognize that we have a set infrastructure cost for the basic supply that we have. That there is a set cost that it will always be there, and we can't bring that below that with that infrastructure. I double checked it. Santa Clara is up to 20% of reclaimed water for our city. We've really worked at this. Now you could say that's because we made all the data centers use it. That's part of it. But we have really worked at that, reclaiming that water and recognizing that water is a precious commodity. And I finished a book just recently called Let There Be Water, and it was given to me by the deputy director of San Jose. And it was all about how Israel handled their water. It was very, very interesting. And one thing they really went after, not only just the behavior and the thinking process, which I think has changed over the last 20 years very much so, but going after the leaks, because they found so much of their potable water was being wasted, and it was leakage. And I found that fascinating that they got it down to 4%. But it was a concentrated effort to do that. So I'd like to look at the risks and what reality that we have as far as our whole system in a holistic way. I think I got through all my notes. I hope that was useful from all of us.
That was very useful. Thank you. Thank you for all of your useful inputs today. The next steps with this is that we're scheduled to have the dedicated planning session during the May 15th board meeting, where we're going to go a little more in depth with those scenarios and scenario planning and putting all of what you said today within that. The focus is really to present information on that and evaluate the water supply reliability risks. This will be an opportunity to also engage, hopefully, with our technical staff and their consultant and provide input on potential future scenarios and really contribute to shaping the long-term strategy for sustainable water supply in the BAWSCA region. So the planning session topic, hopefully will be aligning with those key milestone and strategy 2050 development. And it's a really good step forward towards looking at what projects or programs and policies we might focus on in the future. So that concludes my update and discussion on Strategy 2050, and I'll answer any further questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. There was one little note of mine I missed, and we need to also open up to the public and see if there's any comments. I will say, in the past, we have had our average per household usage, but we've also broken that down for our different municipalities and per population, so that we can really look at where our realities are. I'll use the pandemic as an example. I felt like there were a lot of people who listened very carefully and were being careful during the pandemic, and then my county turned up the rhetoric, and it was like people who were already being careful didn't think they were being careful enough and got a little crazy, and the people who weren't listening were still not listening. So yeah, I think it's good to look and see where our usage could maybe make some changes. Dr. Schneider, do you have another comment? And then
this goes back to your comment on conservation. I went through a big bathroom remodel, second floor. I wanted a pipe that would collect the warm-up water and take it right outside into a rain barrel. I couldn't get it approved. So I think there's still some technology out there that would allow that. I know gray water system. I've got an HE. You kind of that. I think there's more we could do on conservation on that. Again, that's always the carrot, if we can get that before the stick. But it still frustrates me that it was a huge, expensive bathroom. The wall's right there. I couldn't get a pipe through it because it's not through the universal building codes. So look at what we've got up in Sacramento and the fact that they only redo it every 3 to 5 years. Same thing with the reflective paint on the roof. I'm still waiting because I was told, no, Ann, we can't do that till the UBC does it.
Sounds like you need to be contacting assembly member or state senator and tripping them and getting their attention. Well, when we've talked about conservation being made more a way of life, and infrastructure is a good way to do that, and with good policy. Do I have anyone from the public who would like to weigh in, please?
So what a terrific conversation and terrific points.
Is your microphone on?
Oh, is it not on? Can you, or I'm just too
There
far
you
away?
go.
Okay,
Go.
thank you. But hey, we're great comments, great points. I would just like to add, well, Director Vella, Director Schneider, I think Director Zichterman, when you talk about lowering your demand or more realistic demand forecasts and taking a little bit more risk, that all comes to price and cost. And I know, I believe if the Burlingame director were here, he would say there's a big concern about costs. And I know our director in Palo Alto would say there's a big concern about costs. And by the way, Palo Alto is terrible on the gross per capita demand, so we need to work on that. But the reason I say all this is, what if we change the name of this slightly? And some other agencies have done this. And I'm going to also add one more issue. You know, the San Diego County Water Authority, and I brought them up a lot, is gone through severe financial problems. And what if we change the title to reliability and affordability rather than just reliability? And I worry that reliability sort of echoes what we did a number of years ago, and I think our situation today is quite a bit different. And so I just think of trying to elevate the affordability, which I've heard so much of from you guys here. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Well, and I've joked when I tease Palo Alto, physician, heal thyself. Please, another.
Thanks, Spreck Rosecrans again. I just want to say that it was a really interesting discussion to hear the way you folks look at the cost and supply, and that you're also questioning San Francisco and what they're doing. I think and I also thank you.
Get the
I'm sorry.
microphone a little closer.
And I also thank you. As of 2 years ago, I'm actually a constituent, or almost a constituent. I live in Half Moon Bay, but we have a well. So I'm watering a guilt-free lawn, which is a little strange. But anyway, but I really appreciate all the work that you folks do, and for your communities, and reliable water, something that we all need. So thank you.
Thank you. We do take our job very seriously, and that's why we're here. Thank you so much. I hope you got lots of good feedback, and that'll keep you busy. Wonderful. Thank you so much. We're up to 7, CEO report.
Great.
Take it away, our CEO.
All right, well, I will be brief. First item on CEO report is just transmitting some slides from San Francisco on the water supply conditions. I'll run through these pretty quickly because they're very similar to what we saw last month, but the water supply is in very good shape this year. We've had, as you can see it from the first slide, the storage is in excellent condition, better than average storage. The precipitation over Hetchy has been very normal, right at median, with some ups and downs, but some late rain and snow that's gotten us there. As you can see here, a big February and March has really jumped this quite a bit. And in the Bay Area, where most of us are living, we're almost to our 12-month median, with still several months, obviously summer months, to go. So that's certainly great news for the water supply. And as I think someone mentioned, this is the wettest 3-year period in recent memory, maybe last 100 years. And obviously, most of that has to do with 3 years ago having 230% of normal, but having 3 relatively normal years in a row is fantastic for the water system. The snowpack is similarly in an average state. And then to the demand side, I think I would say that the demand is tracking pretty well with last year's demand. That's just a quick observation. Looks like the National Weather Service is predicting a little bit more rain in the second part and coming up next week. I don't know if that is still the case. Those change a lot. And that is a report of water supply conditions. I know we have someone from San Francisco here if there's any questions, but I think it's relatively the same as we heard last month from them at the board meeting. So I'll pause for 1 second there, and seeing none, I'll move on.
I was going to say Allison is here if there's a question. She looks very ready to answer anything.
Everything's good.
Okay.
So the last item before closed session, just a verbal report, oral report on the water supply amendment in Tier 2 drought plan update. We are very, very close on this item, down to final review of commas and small wording choices. We're very, very close to submitting the water supply amendment for SFPUC consideration, and we hope to get that finalized this week and on their agenda for May 13th. So we'll look forward to that coming up on May 13th, and we're very excited to reach that big milestone in that process. But we'll certainly let everyone know as that goes. And then the big ask will be to get all the agencies to approve that and the Tier 2 plan as we go forward this summer. That is my report. We don't have a closed session.
That is a big deal to get to that point, and my daughter teases me when I said I'm coming to this meeting. She goes, "You're going to your water board meeting?" And I said, that's an unfortunate way to say water board. But let's hope we don't have to get to that point to get everybody to sign on. hoping that this saga can be over. Wonderful. All right, we have canceled closed session, so we don't even have a report from closed session. I know, Allison, that's no fun for you. But if there's any other comments, not, we will adjourn. I will make the point, we'll send out reminders as to where we will be. How's that? Because just read your emails carefully. It could be the same, it could change. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time. Drive carefully.